200 years after Ripley died fighting the xenomorphs, scientists aboard the USM Auriga were working on a top-secret military project to clone her. They recovered traces of her blood from the place where she died, and after 8 failed attempts, they finally succeeded in creating a viable clone. Once the clone was fully developed, the scientists performed surgery to reach her uterus because a xenomorph had impregnated her before she died. Dr. Wren and Dr. Gedimon were thrilled to discover that the alien embryo had been cloned as well, so they placed it inside a containment chamber for further study. At that moment, Ripley suddenly woke up and grabbed one of the doctors by the arm, trying to smash his face into the glass. The others quickly restrained her. 3 days later, Ripley regained consciousness inside a cocoon-like chamber, and noticed the number 8 tattooed on her forearm. The scientists performed a routine medical examination and were amazed by her excellent condition. Her surgical wound was already healing at an incredible rate. When Dr. Wren deliberately provoked her, Ripley wrapped her legs around him, demonstrating immense strength, and nearly choked him to death before a guard rushed in and sedated her again. Afterward, Ripley underwent a series of language and intelligence tests. She learned at an astonishing pace, leaving the scientists fascinated. They concluded that her extraordinary abilities were the result of her DNA merging with xenomorph DNA. When they showed her a picture of a child, Ripley broke down in tears, remembering both her daughter and the unborn child she had lost during her final mission. This infuriated General Perez, who wanted an obedient, emotionless clone. However, it became clear that Ripley still retained her memories. Perez argued with the scientists, and warned them that he would not hesitate to kill Ripley if she became a threat. He then checked on their second experiment, and discovered that the xenomorph extracted from Ripley was a queen that was growing rapidly, and would soon begin laying eggs. During lunch, Dr. Gedimon and Dr. Wren explained to Ripley how they had recovered her blood and successfully cloned her. They also confirmed that they had cloned the xenomorph queen. Ripley immediately realized what they had done, and warned them that everyone aboard the ship would die, but no one took her seriously. Wren even mocked and insulted her. Sometime later, a smuggling ship known as the Betty arrived at the military station. Its crew consisted of mercenaries, including Johnner, who loved playing with knives. He threw one at the leg of the ship's mechanic, Vries, who was paralyzed from the waist down, but Call was clearly disgusted by that kind of joke. The station's security officers confirmed that the mercenaries were unarmed. Their leader, Elgin, announced that they had delivered the cargo. It turned out they had been hired by General Perez to kidnap several civilians so they could be used as hosts for the xenomorph experiments. After receiving their payment, Elgin asked for rooms so his crew could stay for a few days. Perez agreed, as long as they stayed away from the laboratories. Meanwhile, the sleeping captives were transferred into the research labs, where the scientists placed several xenomorph eggs in front of them so they would become hosts for the creatures. At the same time, Ripley was playing basketball by herself to test her enhanced abilities. She proved that she possessed not only incredible strength but also remarkable speed and lightning-fast reflexes. When the mercenaries spotted her, Johnner tried to challenge her, but Ripley moved so quickly that he couldn't even touch the ball. When he stepped closer and made a crude attempt to flirt with her, she effortlessly threw him to the ground with just 2 moves. Another mercenary tossed the basketball toward her, and as Ripley turned to catch it, Christie blindsided her with a stack of gym weights. Her nose started bleeding, but she barely reacted and immediately knocked Christie to the floor as well. Just then, the scientists arrived to escort her away. Before leaving, Ripley launched the basketball with perfect accuracy and casually wiped the blood from her nose. When the blood dripped onto the floor, it melted the metal beneath it, proving that her blood had become acidic, just like a xenomorph's. Later, Dr. Gedimon inspected the captive xenomorphs. One of them snarled at him through the glass. Gedimon mocked it, made funny faces, and even kissed the window. When the creature growled again, he released a freezing gas into the chamber to calm it down. The xenomorph learned to back away every time he threatened to press the button. Meanwhile, Call pretended to be drunk so her teammates would leave her alone. She secretly slipped through the facility and used a chemical spray to unlock the door to Ripley's containment room. She carefully examined Ripley and noticed the surgical scar, realizing that the alien embryo had already been removed. When Ripley woke up, Call offered to kill her, but Ripley showed no fear. Instead, she performed a shocking demonstration, allowing Call to stab her hand with a weapon while her acidic blood dissolved the blade before Call's eyes. When Call picked up the knife again, Ripley's wound sealed itself almost instantly. Ripley then guided Call's hand to her face and told her she could now sense the presence of the xenomorphs. Call wanted Ripley to help destroy them, but Ripley replied that it was already too late. As Call tried to leave, Wren's guards stopped her, but the mercenaries confronted them. Wren accused them of breaking the station's only rule and threatened them with execution. The mercenaries immediately opened fire, sparking a fierce gunfight with the guards. Elgin's crew worked together flawlessly and quickly overwhelmed the soldiers. After the battle, Elgin demanded to know Call's true intentions, and she admitted that she was an undercover operative sent to shut down the scientists' illegal experiments. Meanwhile, inside the laboratory, Gedimon witnessed the chaos and tried to contact security. While he was distracted, 2 captive xenomorphs turned on the third one and killed it. Its acidic blood melted through the floor, creating an escape route. At the same moment, Ripley sensed everything happening from inside her cell. Gedimon attempted to release the sedative gas, but it was already too late. The xenomorphs escaped through the hole in the floor. When Gedimon leaned over to inspect the opening, a xenomorph's claw suddenly shot out and dragged him inside. As the station's alarms echoed throughout the ship, a security guard entered the containment chamber to investigate the breach. A xenomorph pressed the gas release button, causing the freezing gas to kill the guard instead. The crew of the Betty abandoned the firefight and fled, while the soldiers rushed toward the escape pods. The first pod launched safely, but a xenomorph managed to sneak into the second one and slaughter the soldiers before the hatch could close. General Perez threw a grenade into the pod, which exploded moments after launch. While he was distracted, another xenomorph appeared behind him and killed him. Elsewhere, Vries was searching for spare parts when he spotted a xenomorph above him. He opened fire, splashing acidic blood onto his legs. Since he was paralyzed, he couldn't feel the burns on his legs, but his hand was injured, causing him to fire wildly in panic. At the same time, another xenomorph tried to reach Ripley. Using her enhanced strength, she ripped open a control panel and used her acidic blood to short-circuit the electrical system, unlocking the door and finally escaping. The mercenaries were making their way back to the Betty, but Elgin split off from the group after noticing Vries' weapon lying on the floor. Suddenly, a loud noise startled him, but it turned out to be nothing more than falling pipes. As he stepped closer to retrieve the weapon, a xenomorph burst through a ventilation grate and killed him. The rest of the crew heard his screams and rushed to help, but they arrived too late. When the xenomorph suddenly appeared behind them, they tried to escape, only to discover the door was locked. As the creature stood over Elgin's body, it was suddenly shot from a hidden opening in the wall. The shooter was Ripley, who had been hiding nearby. The mercenaries turned on Wren and threatened him until he admitted there were 12 xenomorphs loose aboard the station. The group reluctantly agreed to work with Ripley despite Call's objections. Before leaving, Ripley tore out the xenomorph's inner jaw so Call could use it as proof of what they were facing. As the group continued forward, they reunited with Vries. Soon afterward, Ripley announced that she could sense the station moving. Wren confirmed that the emergency autopilot had activated and that the station was now on a direct course toward Earth. No one liked the news because Earth had become a barren wasteland. Their only hope was to reach the Betty before it was too late. The group continued through the station until Ripley stopped in front of another laboratory. Inside, she was horrified to discover the failed cloning attempts that had come before her. Clones numbered 1 through 6 were dead and preserved inside cryogenic tubes, but clone number 7 was still alive, lying on an operating table connected to life support equipment. The suffering clone begged Ripley to end its misery. Without hesitation, Ripley used a flamethrower to put it out of its pain, then burned the entire laboratory to the ground, destroying all the other failed clones as well. Call was sickened by what she had seen and responded by punching Wren in the face. In another room, the group found the kidnapped civilians the mercenaries had delivered for the experiments. At first, they believed everyone was dead, but a man named Purvis suddenly cried out. Once he realized they weren't going to hurt him, he calmed down. However, after catching his scent, Ripley realized that he already had a xenomorph embryo inside him and refused to let him come with them. Call disagreed and insisted they couldn't abandon him. She explained that if they escaped quickly enough, they could place Purvis into cryogenic stasis and perform surgery later to save his life. The team continued toward the Betty, bringing Purvis with them. Their next obstacle was the flooded galley, where the emergency sprinkler system had filled the area with water. Vries had no choice but to leave behind his wheelchair, so Christie carried him on his back. Beyond that, the next passageway was completely submerged, forcing everyone to swim through it. As they swam, two xenomorphs appeared behind them. Johnner immediately shot one of them, but the other kept chasing the group and managed to grab one of the mercenaries, dragging her away. While the creature was distracted killing its victim, the rest of the team kept swimming until they reached a tunnel sealed by a thick layer of disgusting organic membrane. Ripley smashed through it with her incredible strength, allowing everyone to surface and finally catch their breath once again. But an unpleasant surprise was waiting for them. They found themselves surrounded by xenomorph eggs. Suddenly, a facehugger leaped out of one of the eggs and latched onto Ripley's face. She immediately dove underwater to fight it off, and after a brief struggle, her enhanced strength allowed her to kill it. The rest of the group also dove underwater and tossed several grenades through the opening, destroying all of the eggs. Just then, the xenomorph that had survived earlier reappeared in the water. The group swam through the passage and started climbing the ladder to the upper level. However, the hatch above refused to open. Ren pulled out his pistol, claiming he was going to shoot the lock, but instead he shot Call, sending her falling into the water. Furious, Vries fired at Ren, who dodged the shots. Ironically, the bullets struck the lock, forcing the hatch open. Ren escaped through it, and immediately sealed the door behind him. Moments later, the xenomorph climbed out of the water and began scaling the ladder after them. The group opened fire, causing acidic blood to spray everywhere and severely burn Christie. Johnner kept firing and finally killed the creature, but it was still clinging to Christie's leg while Vries struggled to hold onto the ladder. Realizing his extra weight would doom Vries, Christie unfastened the harness connecting them and sacrificed himself, falling with the xenomorph to his death. The survivors wondered how they would escape until the hatch suddenly opened and Call appeared on the other side. Everyone made it safely into a secure room. There, Ripley examined Call's wound and discovered she wasn't human at all, she was a robot. Call admitted that she was a legendary second-generation android, one of the incredibly lifelike models that had developed self-awareness, rebelled against their creators, disabled their wireless tracking systems, and blended into human society. Knowing exactly what androids like Call were capable of, Ripley took her into a small chapel and connected her directly to the station's central computer. Call confirmed that the station was heading toward Earth and warned that if the xenomorphs reached the planet, they could wipe out humanity. Destroying the station would require more power than Call had available, so Ripley suggested another solution: reprogram the station so it would crash into Earth instead of landing safely. Meanwhile, Ren was making his way toward the Betty, but Call locked every door in his path. She then used the station's intercom to reveal his location to the xenomorphs. The team continued toward the Betty, while John lost his temper after learning that the station was on a collision course. He tried to attack Call, but Ripley grabbed him by the throat and threatened to rip out his tongue if he didn't calm down. At that moment, Ripley sensed something strange and said the Queen was in pain. Suddenly, several xenomorphs burst up from beneath the floor and dragged her away. They didn't harm her because her DNA had become similar to theirs. They recognized her as one of their own and took her to the hive. Meanwhile, the rest of the team reached the Betty, but Purvis was suddenly shot by Dr. Ren, who had taken Call hostage. During the standoff, the chestburster finally erupted from Purvis' chest. Despite his fatal wound, Purvis staggered toward Ren. Bullets couldn't stop him, and he reached Ren, beating him brutally. At that very moment, the newborn xenomorph fully emerged. The mercenaries immediately opened fire and killed it, while both Purvis and Ren died in the confrontation. Meanwhile, Ripley discovered that the hive was packed with xenomorphs, with the Queen at its center. Gedimon explained that the Queen no longer laid eggs. Instead, she had evolved to give live birth like a human, and had delivered a horrifying hybrid that was half human and half xenomorph. The newborn hybrid immediately killed the Queen, then approached Ripley, licked her face, and accepted her as its true mother. When Gedimon tried to speak, the creature bit off the top of his head, killing him instantly. Ripley took advantage of the chaos and escaped, racing toward the Betty, which was already preparing for takeoff. Fortunately, she managed to leap aboard at the last second and reunited with the mercenaries inside the cockpit. As the ship launched, Ripley noticed that one of the doors hadn't been sealed. She went to close it, only to discover that the hybrid had secretly boarded the ship. At the same time, the vessel began shaking violently due to severe instability. One of the mercenaries went looking for Call, but the hybrid killed him almost immediately. Worried that Call had been gone too long, Ripley rushed into the room just in time to find the hybrid attacking and injuring her. Ripley then used the creature's emotional attachment to distract it. At the same time, she splashed some of her acidic blood onto one of the ship's windows, melting a small hole through the glass. The sudden drop in cabin pressure created a powerful vacuum. As Ripley and Call held on with all their strength, they watched in horror as the hybrid was slowly pulled toward the opening. Its internal organs were violently sucked into space until it finally died, and its body was completely ejected into the vacuum. At the same time, the military station crashed into Earth and exploded, destroying every xenomorph aboard. Inside the cockpit, Jana and Vries fought desperately to keep the Betty under control. Despite violent turbulence and extreme heat, they successfully landed the ship safely on Earth, and everyone who remained survived. In the final scene, Ripley and Call sit together, looking out over the ruins of the city as they wonder what comes next. And that's how the movie ends. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.